The moment the lights dimmed in the ballroom, I was already in position, watching my wife from the second-floor balcony like a sniper lining up a target. She didn't know I was there. Not yet. None of them did. But it wouldn't be long now. Not long at all. Down below, Madison stood under a halo of soft chandeliers, her bare shoulders glowing in that crimson backless gown I bought her 3 years ago in Paris. She had told me it didn't fit anymore. Said she gave it away. Liar. Now it clung to her like sin, like every secret she thought I was too old, too stupid, too slow to uncover. She smiled like a movie star, cocktail in hand, surrounded by young, overly polished execs, the kind who thought Rolexes and freshly laminated MBAs made them invincible. And beside her, brushing her arm a little too often, laughing a little too loud, was him. Jackson Trent. Hair slicked back like he stepped out of a perfume ad. 40 years old, tops. Cocky, smug, the kind of guy who calls himself a disruptor on LinkedIn and still uses crushing it in boardrooms. I'd memorized every detail about him in the last 6 weeks. Every quarterly report he padded. Every intern he flirted with. Every glowing review my wife hand-fed HR about his innovative thinking. They thought they were clever. Thought I was just some quiet, fading husband with salt in my beard and too much patience. Thought I was sitting at home, sipping scotch, totally oblivious to the fact that my wife was warming someone else's sheets and building someone else's career at the same damn time. They were wrong. They didn't know the man they were mocking had spent 25 years devouring arrogant little climbers like Trent. Didn't know that before this gala, I had already bought his bonus out from under him and acquired the voting rights on Madison's entire future without saying a word. But that's not where this began. No. The explosion tonight was only the crescendo. The betrayal started quieter, more insidious. 3 months ago, I noticed Madison stopped looking me in the eye during breakfast. Just subtle, split-second hesitations when I asked how her day looked. A forced smile. Averted gaze. Then came the late nights. Client emergencies. Team dinners. On-site reviews. I'm not an idiot. I didn't build a multi-million-dollar logistics firm by ignoring patterns. And this wasn't some good instinct or jealous husband fantasy. Madison was slipping. Her lies had fingerprints. Digital trails. Sloppy oversights like copied texts, mismatched timelines, her perfume changing for no reason. I confronted her once. Just once. A Sunday morning. Sunlight, pancakes, newspaper on the porch. You sure you're happy? I asked her, casually, like it meant nothing. She smiled without teeth. Of course, babe. Just stressed. Big project rollout. You know how it is. I knew how it was, all right. She didn't even ask me why I was asking. Because she'd already moved on. Already decided I was a placeholder, a stepping stone she had outgrown. The man who paid her way through grad school, who supported her while she found herself, while she flirted with graphic design, interior decorating, and finally landed on corporate partnerships. I lifted her up, and she used that height to leap into another man's arms. So I smiled too. And that evening, I began to plan. I contacted a man named Randall Kinley, an old contact from my acquisitions days. He'd once called me a corporate hitman in a Wall Street Journal piece. He was right. Randall still had his fingers in the right pots. 2 phone calls later, I had a financial profile on Delara Solutions, Madison's mid-sized tech firm. Their numbers looked strong, but their leadership was soft, too comfortable, too unaware of how quickly the rug could be pulled from under them. The firm had just secured Series C funding. Vulnerable. Hungry for growth. That meant I could quietly buy my way in without alerting too many egos. By week's end, I was speaking with silent stakeholders, those who didn't care who held the reins, so long as the profits climbed. 2 weeks later, I controlled 31%. A handshake deal with Randall secured another 9. 40% wasn't a majority, but in Alara's case, it was power. And Madison, bless her naive little heart, was still filing expense reports and planning events, completely unaware that her husband had slipped behind enemy lines and started whispering in her boss's ears. I sat through Zoom calls under an alias. Used a proxy. Pretended to be a consulting strategist hired by the board. Madison never heard my voice. But I heard hers. Watched her pitch ideas. Watched her mention Jackson in glowing terms. Watched them laugh together in side panels and accidentally forget to mute themselves during one meeting. She called him baby. He said, You better wear that red thing to the gala. I nearly crushed the glass in my hand. But I waited. No angry texts. No slam doors. No drama. I was building something stronger than fury. Something permanent. Which brings us back to tonight. To the gala. To Madison, arm in arm with the man who mocked me to his colleagues without knowing I was standing on the balcony above him with a smile colder than stone. He leaned in and whispered something in her ear. She threw her head back and laughed, this carefree, loose laugh I hadn't heard in years. That was fine. Let them laugh. Because in about 1 hour, the master of ceremonies would announce the new majority stakeholder of Alara Solutions. He would welcome me to the stage. And every flash of camera, every jaw hitting the floor, every bead of sweat forming on Jackson's smug little forehead would be mine to savor. But I wasn't here for the applause. I was here to bury them both. Slowly. Publicly. With a smile. And the clock was ticking. 10 minutes before the announcement, I moved. Slipped from the balcony, down the private stairwell reserved for event staff, past the wine cart and linen storage, and into the crowd like smoke. No one noticed me at first. I was just another man in a tailored tuxedo, face half hidden in the soft shadows of chandeliers. But she noticed. Oh yes. The moment Madison caught sight of me from across the ballroom, her whole body jolted. Like she'd seen a ghost. She blinked. Once. Twice. The mask of polished elegance began to crack, just around the eyes. I didn't smile. Didn't wave. Just met her stare. Her date. Jackson was still rambling to some junior associate about a new cross-market integration, gesturing with the confidence of a man who thought the entire room bent around him. He hadn't seen me yet. That made it better. Madison stepped away from him mid-sentence and practically glided across the floor, heels silent on the marble. She reached me just as the first notes of jazz kicked in and the ballroom lights deepened. "Colton," she said, her voice tight and sugar-coated. "What are you doing here? What's it look like?" I said calmly, eyes drifting to the name badge on her wrist. "Event organizer. I got the invite. +1, right?" "You weren't supposed to," she stopped. Recalculating. "I didn't think you'd want to come. I told you it was just a work thing." I tilted my head slightly. "And yet you brought company." Her eyes flickered. "It's not, he's just." "Madison." I cut in, keeping my tone level, I know. The blood drained from her face. She tried to regain footing. "Look, it's complicated. We've been distant. You've been working all the time, and I didn't mean for it to." But she didn't finish. Because Jackson had finally noticed me. He came swaggering up like he was about to put out a fire with a smirk. The gall. The man had no idea he was walking toward the last business deal he'd ever close. "You all right, babe?" he said, sliding next to her, giving me a once-over. "Oh, sorry, didn't catch your name. You a vendor or something?" I looked at Madison. She didn't speak, just stood there, stiff, watching two men circling the same invisible line. She wasn't sure where this was going yet. I extended my hand to Jackson. "Colton Hill." He shook it, firm grip, eyes flicking sideways in confusion. The name hadn't registered. Madison's husband. And there it was. The twitch in his jaw. The faint stumble in his next breath. "Oh," he said too quickly. "Right. I didn't realize." She never mentioned. "Of course she didn't," I replied smoothly. "Why spoil the illusion?" He laughed, awkward, scratching his neck. "Well, hey, no hard feelings. It's just business, right?" That line. I wanted to put his face through the ice sculpture. But instead, I smiled. Because right on cue, the MC took the mic at the head of the room, tapping it gently. A hush rolled across the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention?" he said. "Before we move to awards, we have a very special introduction to make." Madison turned her head, dread blooming behind her perfect makeup. Jackson looked back and forth between us, catching something sharp in the air, but too dense to grasp the shape of it yet. "Tonight, we welcome a new voice to our leadership family," the MC continued. "A man whose recent acquisition gives him a controlling interest in Alara Solutions. Please join me in welcoming our newest and largest shareholder." The pause was perfect. Mr. Colton Hill. You could have heard a pin drop. Mouths opened. A few people clapped out of instinct, not comprehension. But Madison? She didn't move. Just stared at me like the floor beneath her had started to crack open. Jackson took half a step back. What? There must be some mistake. No mistake, I said, buttoning my jacket. You just didn't read the quarterly filings. And then I walked forward, up to the stage, leaving them behind in a storm of whispers, darting eyes, and the first signs of a beautifully constructed collapse. But I wasn't here to humiliate them in a single moment. That would be mercy. I was here to dissect them slowly, strip away the safety nets, remove the blinders, let them feel the ground disappearing inch by inch. Madison had given her body and her loyalty to a man she thought had promise. Jackson had built his confidence off stolen glances and boardroom flirtations. Neither of them had noticed the storm brewing right under their feet. And I had just taken the stage. I didn't deliver a speech. I didn't need to. The moment I stepped up to that mic, I simply nodded once, turned toward the sea of expectant faces, and said, I look forward to working closely with all of you. Polite applause followed. A few executives in the front row exchanged looks, clearly wondering how they'd missed the internal coup. Others smiled wide. Those were the smart ones, the ones who knew which direction the wind had just shifted and were already leaning into it. And as I stepped down from that stage, I didn't look at Madison or Jackson. I didn't need to, because now they were the ones trying not to be seen, trying to figure out how deep the knife had gone. Back at the bar, a waiter offered me champagne. I declined and asked for club soda. The man in control doesn't need to get drunk. He needs to watch. Watch the empire he just claimed. Watch the traitors scramble for footing. And that's exactly what I did as I returned to the floor. I made no beeline to Madison. I wanted her to stew in that silence, to try and piece it together. Why hadn't she known? How did I manage it? When did it start? What did I know? All the right questions. None of the answers she wanted. For 30 minutes, I mingled, reassured board members, shook hands with engineers, product managers, department heads. I smiled as they congratulated me, listened as they explained their visions for the next year. I nodded, complimented a marketing strategy or two I had already planned to gut, all while Madison stood 20 feet away, sipping her second cocktail too fast, her eyes following me like a hound follows the scent of danger. Jackson? He was falling apart faster. He was pacing near the entrance to the balcony, phone in hand, typing furiously, likely messaging some VP who owed him a favor or trying to cross-reference the shareholder registry. But it was all wasted motion. The trap had already been sprung. I had built it from the moment I read her texts. Yes, texts. I hadn't told her I had access. Why would I? Madison, for all her careful grooming and professional ambition, had left her iCloud logged in on the old iPad in our bedroom drawer. She hadn't touched it in over a year. And one day, while searching for headphones, I opened it to find a full sync waiting. Messages, notes, shared images, including one message chain labeled Hotel My Escape. That's where it really began. It wasn't just one fling. It wasn't even just Jackson. There had been others. The texts weren't all recent. Some dated back 2, 3 years. Different names, nicknames, stupid little emojis and late-night messages with timestamps that lined up exactly with the client dinners and strategy retreats I'd paid for without question. But Jackson was the latest, the boldest, the one she thought she could build a future with. That's why she let herself slip. That's why she took risks. She believed he had power. She thought she was trading up. And me? I was the old scaffolding. Outdated. Heavy. Useless once the tower was complete. She had no idea that I was the damn architect. As I circled the room again, I finally locked eyes with her. This time, I didn't avoid her. I walked right up, watched her try to compose herself. Colton, she said, her voice softer, too careful now. We need to talk. I thought we were past that stage. I replied flatly. Please, she said. This isn't how it looks. I laughed, sharp and joyless. You think I came here to argue about hotel receipts and lies? Her mouth opened, closed. I didn't come for explanations, I continued. I came for closure. You're blowing this up over what? Some mistake? Some late-night stupid choices? You never talked to me. You haven't been with me in months. Right, I said, cold rising in my chest. Because your version of being with someone involves sneaking out of conferences with Jackson at 2 a.m., and sending selfies from his hotel bed. I saw it all, Madison. She turned pale. That was the first crack, the one that ran too deep to patch over. She started, then stopped. She was calculating, deciding whether denial would still work, whether pity might, maybe even anger. Too late. I own your exit package now, I said quietly, so only she could hear. I could have signed it before the gala, left it on your seat at dinner. But where's the poetry in that? Her hands trembled. You're not going to fire me. Watch me. And I walked away again. Because that wasn't the end. Not yet. Jackson was next. The man who thought he was untouchable, who walked like he owned every room, who once laughed to a coworker. She used to be married. Poor guy. No idea she traded up. I hadn't even scratched the surface of what was coming for him. But it was close. And the next 48 hours would be the longest of his smug little life. The real games began the morning after the gala. Jackson Trent arrived at Alara's headquarters in a charcoal suit that screamed desperation. He tried to walk like nothing had changed, but his eyes betrayed him. Quick flicks to every hallway. Jumpy blinks at the glass offices he used to pass with a smirk. He knew something was coming. He just didn't know how deep the knife would go. I was already there, seated in the executive boardroom, sipping black coffee while a fresh stack of sealed manila folders sat in front of me. Each one had a name. Each one held a future. And one of them, thicker, heavier, and sealed with a red tab, had J. Trent written in clean, bold type across the center. He didn't know it yet, but this morning would end with his access revoked, his reputation torched, and his network infected with just enough doubt to make every future interview feel like walking through landmines. But I wasn't rushing. Precision matters more than speed when you're delivering a personalized collapse. Mr. Hill, the department heads are in reception, my assistant said, poking her head in. She'd only worked under me for 3 days and already understood that I didn't tolerate chaos or ego, just execution. Send them in one at a time, I replied. The first few were easy. CFO, head of HR, engineering lead. All competent. All loyal to results over office politics. I rewarded them with reassurances, bonus restructures, expansion budgets. I made it clear, your past doesn't matter, only your value going forward does. Then, just before 11, came the knock I'd been waiting for. Jackson stepped in, still trying to play alpha. Colton, he said, forcing a grin. Hell of a reveal last night. I leaned back in my chair, gestured to the seat opposite me. Jackson, have a seat. He did. I didn't offer him coffee. Look, he began, clasping his hands together like some junior exec trying to pitch a Hail Mary idea. I know how this might look. Gala stuff, I mean. It's complicated. Impersonal. Let's keep it professional, I said, cutting him off. Because what you and I are going to discuss has nothing to do with Madison. His eyes lit up for half a second. Relief. Mistaken. I've reviewed your department's numbers, I continued. Revenue's up, but that's due to 2 legacy clients you inherited. Your proposals since Q3 have had below-average conversion rates. And, oddly enough, over 80 hours of logged business development activity were duplicated across multiple team members' timesheets, ones your office approved. He blinked. Swallowed. That's just clerical. You also logged company-paid flights to Vegas, Miami, and Austin, all under the guise of strategic networking. No formal reports submitted. No new clients acquired. His voice cracked. There were leads. Just nothing materialized. I nodded slowly. You filed your expense reports from Madison's email. Twice. Silence. I've seen enough men like you to know the type, I said, leaning forward now. My voice dropped. You think you can charm your way past consequences. Smile through fraud. Hide behind inflated KPIs and sleeping with your direct manager's wife like that grants immunity. Jackson's face drained of all color. You're not the first climber I've buried, I added, sliding the red-tabbed folder across the table. But you might be the first one dumb enough to walk into the lion's den holding a stake. He didn't even open the folder. Just stared at it. What is this? He asked quietly. Your severance. Generous, considering the circumstances. You'll sign it. You'll walk out with a handshake, and you'll never speak of your time here again. You'll give up your equity vesting, of course. That was always contingent on performance, not pillow talk. His jaw clenched. You're blowing this up because of Madison. This is personal. Wrong. I said flatly. What I do to her comes later. What I'm doing to you. This is business. He stared at the paper. I watched him break in real time. The mask fell off. The cracks split wide. Jackson Trent, the bold disruptor, the strategic genius, reduced to a man who couldn't talk his way out of a paper trap. You really think people won't notice? He finally spat. You think firing me makes you look like the bigger man? I stood, collected the untouched coffee mug I'd brought just for show. I don't care what they think. Because in 12 minutes, every division head will receive a company-wide update announcing your departure. And the only thing they'll be wondering is who's next. I didn't shake his hand when he left. Didn't look back. Instead, I opened Madison's file next. Not to terminate. Not yet. Her punishment needed to be slower. She didn't just cheat on me. She tried to build a future on the ashes of the man who built hers. She didn't just betray me. She replaced me. In her mind, I was already buried. Forgotten. No. She had to watch her new world collapse around her. One floor at a time. And she would. Because by the end of the week, her friends in the office would stop talking to her. Her department would lose funding. Her strategic initiative would be quietly reclassified, reassigned, and dismantled under her nose. And she'd still have to show up, smile, pretend, until she couldn't anymore. She didn't find out about Jackson's firing until the next morning. I had the email sent at 6:03 a.m. sharp. No farewell luncheon. No glowing tribute. Just a sterile HR memo stating that, effective immediately, Mr. Jackson Trent has concluded his time with Alara Solutions. I made sure it hit the inboxes before most employees had even finished brushing their teeth. Madison read it on her phone during her commute. She was in the backseat of her rideshare when it hit, probably halfway across the bridge, lipstick half done, coffee in one hand. I imagined the way her eyes would freeze, fingers suddenly slack on the screen. How she'd read the message twice, maybe 3 times, like her vision had betrayed her. No one had told her. No one had to. She was no longer in the loop. No more pillow whispers. No more inside tracks. And when she arrived at the office that morning, the temperature had changed. The same coworkers who used to greet her with hugs and compliments now gave polite nods, stiff smiles. Her assistant wasn't at her desk. Her nameplate was missing from the Monday strategy board. And her swipe card? It still worked, but only for her office. Not the executive floor. Not the conference suite. She was still technically employed, but only because I wanted her to be. See, I didn't want her fired. I wanted her excluded. Overlooked. Invisible. That's the worst punishment for someone like Madison, someone who lived off attention, who built her identity on being admired, respected, seen. I learned something critical about her during our marriage. She didn't fear consequences. She feared irrelevance. So I made her irrelevant. First, I stripped her title. Quietly. Internally. Her new designation was Project Liaison, reporting to a regional lead 3 pay grades below her previous rank. The change wasn't announced, wasn't public, just a subtle erasure. Her direct reports were reassigned. Her email group access was revoked. No more calendar invites from department heads. No more confidential strategy decks in her inbox. But she kept showing up, wearing new dresses, smiling for ghosts. I watched the security footage. Yes, I had feeds routed to a private console in my penthouse. She'd walk in with practiced confidence, drop her handbag on the desk, open her laptop like she had a dozen calls lined up. But no one came. No one called. No one cared. And then, mid-morning, she started calling him. Jackson. For missed calls the first day, 10 the next. I could tell when he finally picked up, because she closed her office blinds and stayed inside for 46 minutes. Afterward, she sat still for a long time, eyes glazed over, lips motionless. I didn't need to hear the conversation. I knew how it went. He had nothing left to give her. He was toxic now. No company would touch him once they found out about the fraud review, which, conveniently, was flagged and sent to 3 of our partner firms via anonymous compliance channels. His NDA prevented him from even hinting that I'd orchestrated it. All he could do was drift further into obscurity. She'd bet her whole hand on that man. And lost. By the end of the week, Madison's posture had changed. Her stride slowed. Her makeup got heavier, like she was trying to paint over the cracks in her confidence. She wore longer sleeves, darker tones. That Friday, she left by 2:15 p.m. without logging out. She didn't return until noon the following Monday. I wasn't done. That Monday morning, I summoned her to a meeting. No agenda, no explanation, just a message from my assistant. Mr. Hill would like a brief check-in at 10:30. She walked into my office exactly on time, wearing a navy blouse and pantsuit. Her eyes were sharp again, but the edges were brittle. She was holding herself together with sheer will. I didn't stand. "Madison," I said simply, gesturing toward the chair across from me. She sat, crossed her legs, folded her hands. "You've been quiet lately," I said, voice calm. "Everything all right?" She stared at me, searching for an angle. "You know it's not. I'm giving you a chance to speak," I said. "Take it." She leaned forward slightly. "Colton, this is insane. I get it, okay? I made a mistake. But you can't just turn my life into this." I tilted my head. "Turn your life into what?" "This," she hissed. "Isolation. Paranoia. I feel like I'm walking around in a company that forgot I exist. You made everyone afraid to talk to me." "Correction," I said. "You made yourself a liability. I simply stopped protecting you." She exhaled, bitter. "So what's the plan? Keep me here until I break." "I don't want you to break," I said. "That would be too easy. I want you to understand. Every promotion you earned with charm, every opportunity you got by standing beside someone with power, every door you walked through because someone else paid the price, I was always the one holding it open." She looked away. "I gave you every advantage," I continued. "And the moment you thought you didn't need me, you tried to replace me with a man who couldn't even file a clean expense report." Her face went red. "We weren't trying to hurt you." "No," I said sharply. "You were trying to erase me. That's worse." Silence. She looked at me with something I hadn't seen in years: fear. Not fear of punishment. Not fear of scandal. Fear of what came next. "I'm not firing you," I said, rising slowly. "I'm giving you the thing you never knew how to handle." She stood too, uncertain. "What's that?" I walked to the door, opened it, and looked her dead in the eyes. "Obscurity." She walked out without another word. And that's when I knew the real punishment had finally begun. By the second week, she had stopped wearing makeup altogether. Not because she'd accepted anything. No, that would have taken strength. She just couldn't bring herself to keep pretending. That mirror in the office restroom, the one she used to admire herself in every morning, it had become a quiet enemy. One that reflected nothing back but fatigue and failure. She still showed up, though. Every day, hair in a limp bun, outfits pulled from the back of her closet, once forgotten skirts and blazers that had lost their crispness. She walked slower now, head down, avoiding eye contact with the interns she once barked orders at. Every step she took inside Alara was like walking barefoot across glass she'd laid herself. I checked the cameras sometimes, not out of obsession, but precision. You can't rebuild someone's cage unless you know which bars are starting to bend. And Madison, she was crumbling. She still hadn't told anyone. Not about Jackson. Not about me. Pride kept her mouth shut. She wanted people to believe she was just transitioning to a new role, taking a strategic pause. But silence is loud in offices. Rumors began to circulate. Some assumed she had screwed up a client deal. Others whispered about an internal ethics violation. No one knew the truth, that she'd gambled away her soul on a man who now drove rideshare and hadn't answered her last 15 messages. And me? I wasn't finished. Monday morning, I scheduled a performance review. Officially, it was routine restructuring documentation. Unofficially, it was the next brick in the wall. My HR director, Jamie, a sharp, stone-faced woman who had been loyal to me for over a decade, conducted the session. I watched from behind the mirrored glass in the adjacent room. Madison didn't know I was there. She walked in late, didn't apologize, just sat down, crossed her arms, and stared at the wall behind Jamie like none of this mattered. That's how I knew it did. "Madison," Jamie began, clipboard in hand. "We'll keep this brief." Madison gave a half nod, barely listening. "We're doing department-wide evaluations to streamline workflows," Jamie continued. "Your new role falls under Tier 4 restructuring, meaning output, communication, and engagement will all be measured over a 3-week period." "So?" Madison asked flatly. "So far," Jamie said without a blink. "You failed to log your hours consistently, missed 2 stand-up meetings, and failed to respond to 8 internal memos. You've also declined to participate in 2 cross-departmental syncs, both of which required your input. Madison's jaw clenched. I wasn't invited to those syncs. Jamie raised an eyebrow. The invites went to your inbox, time-stamped and confirmed. No answer. And according to your badge logs, Jamie added, flipping a page, you left the building early on 4 separate days last week. No PTO filed. No explanation submitted. Madison looked down. I wasn't doing anything wrong. We're not accusing you of misconduct, Jamie said calmly. But your engagement score is the lowest in your division. That becomes a liability. Madison laughed bitterly. Funny how that word keeps popping up. You'll be on a probationary period for the next 14 business days, Jamie said, standing. We'll review your activity and decide whether a formal separation makes sense. Madison didn't stand. Just sat there, blinking, breathing shallow. Jamie left. I stayed, watching her through the glass. She didn't move for a full 5 minutes. Just stared at the clipboard Jamie had left behind, her reflection in the glass behind it catching the edge of the tears she wouldn't let fall. That evening, she drove home alone. I knew because my private investigator had already confirmed she no longer shared rides. No more Jackson. No more backup plans. She lived in that expensive apartment, the one I used to pay for, completely alone. And the best part? I hadn't even touched the personal accounts yet. Not the trust. Not the passive income she still thought was hers by default. She was living on borrowed time and borrowed funds. She didn't realize that her next quarterly disbursement would be rerouted. That the trust, which I had originally co-funded for family stability, had been legally amended to require behavioral compliance clauses, now that her adultery and corporate misrepresentation had violated 2 of the 5 triggers. She'd find out next week. Maybe at the grocery store. Maybe when her card declined at that overpriced nail salon she still clung to like a thread of her former life. But not yet. Not just yet. Because before I took her money, I wanted her to beg. Not with words. With hope. The kind of fragile, desperate hope that makes a person believe that maybe, they can still come back from the fire they started. Only to find out the fire was just the warm-up. The real burn was coming. And I would be the one holding the match. I made sure it hit her during the most vulnerable hour of the week, Saturday morning, 8:42 a.m. That's when she usually did her errands, dressed down in leggings and a hoodie, coffee in hand, sunglasses hiding the fatigue that had started living permanently beneath her eyes. It used to be our routine, back when we still meant something. Now, it was her escape, her last slice of normalcy. Until that email landed. Subject: Trust Disbursement Suspension Notification. No greeting. No softness. Just cold, legal precision. Due to verified breaches in marital and fiduciary trust as outlined in Sections 5.3 and 6.1 of the Fund Agreement, quarterly disbursements have been suspended pending internal arbitration review. All card-linked accounts are frozen effective immediately. Any attempt to withdraw funds will flag for legal escalation. You may contest this in writing within 30 days or accept the terms of forfeiture under Clause 7. I had written that clause myself 3 years ago. She had signed it, barely skimming the lines, assuming, like she always did, that I'd never pull the pin. She was wrong. The footage from the grocery store, captured by my investigator's silent shoulder cam, told me everything I needed. She walked up to the register with 2 bags of groceries, wine, a stack of skincare products, and her card declined. Twice. She tried another card. Same result. Then her voice dropped low as she leaned over the counter, asking if she could call someone. Her face was flushed, lips tight. The cashier nodded, already too polite. She stepped aside, fumbled for her phone, and made the call. I knew the number. She called me. Of course, I didn't answer. She tried again. Then she left a message, voice trembling, brittle like cracking glass. Colton. I don't know what's going on with the accounts. I think something's wrong with the bank. Can you call me back? Please. I just need to figure this out. Please. She didn't sound angry. She sounded small. Perfect. The next day, a courier delivered an envelope to her apartment. Inside was a printed copy of her signed agreement, every clause she had ignored now highlighted in yellow. No note. No explanation. Just a single red line scribbled at the bottom of the page. You lit the match. I'm just making sure it spreads. On Monday, she didn't show up to the office. No call. No email. Tuesday, she arrived late. Hair unwashed. No makeup. Same black coat she'd worn for 4 days straight. She sat at her desk and stared at the screen for nearly an hour before opening a single file. I watched it live from my office. She wasn't even pretending anymore. That afternoon, I instructed the internal systems team to lock her out of her remaining shared drives. No warning. No message. Just access denied flashing across her monitor like a death knell. She reported the issue to IT. They escalated it. Promised to look into it. They never would. That evening, she called again. This time, her voice was steadier. Controlled. Practiced. Colton, I need to talk to you. Not through lawyers. Not through emails. Just meet me. Please. You've made your point, okay? I'm humiliated. I'm broke. I'm cornered. If that's what you needed to feel better, congratulations. You won. Just give me a chance to say what I need to say. Please. I listened to the message twice. Then I called back. Tomorrow, I said. Noon. My office. You'll have 10 minutes. She didn't ask for more. She just said, okay. And the next day, right at noon, she walked in. Thin. Pale. Dressed in a loose beige sweater that looked like it had been picked from a lost and found bin. She didn't sit. Didn't speak right away. I let the silence stretch. Finally, she took a breath. I loved you, she said. I almost laughed. You loved what I gave you, I said. You loved the comfort, the protection, the open doors. You loved who you were when you stood next to me. She flinched, but didn't deny it. I was stupid, she whispered. I made a mistake. You made dozens, I said. Each one measured, chosen, acted on while I slept beside you. I didn't think. No, I cut her off. You didn't. Because you thought I'd always be there. Because you thought you could gut me and I'd still come running back with a checkbook and an apology for being boring. Tears welled up. She blinked hard. I leaned forward. Let me tell you what's coming, I said, my voice calm, surgical. Your lease? That's up in 31 days. You won't be able to renew without verified income. Your credit? Already flagged. Your reference list? I've removed you from every board you listed. Her lips trembled. You'll apply for jobs, I continued, and maybe you'll even get interviews. But the second they check your references, the story will come out. Quietly. Professionally. Just enough to make them nervous. She was shaking now. I'm not destroying you, Madison. I'm erasing you. Slowly. The same way you tried to erase me. She took a step forward, desperate. Colton, please. I have nothing left. No, I said. Now you finally know what I felt the night I found that first message. The night you let him touch you in the hotel we honeymooned in. She gasped, hand to her mouth. She didn't know I knew that. Oh yes. I knew everything. And I wasn't even done yet. She didn't come into the office again after that meeting. Wednesday passed. Then Thursday. By Friday, her desk was cleared, books gone, files wiped, a sad little pot of dried succulents abandoned like a crime scene. She hadn't given notice. No resignation letter. No exit interview. Just disappeared. And yet, despite her absence, the building still felt like it remembered her. Like her perfume clung to the halls, like whispers trailed in the air she used to command. But this wasn't over. Not even close. Because the final stage of a downfall isn't when the world stops calling. It's when your own family stops answering the phone. See, Madison's mother had always been her emergency parachute. A bitter, judgy widow from Vermont who thought I was too stiff, too calculated, too much like a boardroom, and not enough like a boyfriend. We hadn't spoken since the wedding. I didn't need to. But she did. And when her daughter called her panicked, crying, asking to come home for a while, I made sure she was ready. The call lasted 4 minutes. I had the recording. I just need a place to land, Mom, Madison had said, voice trembling. Just a few months. Until I sort things out. Her mother sighed. You made your bed, Maddie. Colton was good to you. Better than you deserved. And now you want to come crawling back because you ran out of men and money. That silence after the sentence was longer than the entire conversation. Her mother hung up. She didn't call back. I made sure of that, too. Because the day before, her mother had received a carefully curated package, Timelines, documents, texts, nothing explicit, nothing illegal. Just the truth. Packaged like a board presentation. My specialty. I didn't ask her to pick a side. I just let the facts speak. Even your mother turned away, Madison. And now, you're out of lifeboats. I received the email at 2:14 a.m. Saturday night. It was long, rambling, part apology, part confession, part desperation. You've taken everything, Colton, every piece of who I was. I can't sleep. I can't think. I see your face every time I try to find a way out. I hate you, but I get it. I get why you're doing this. And that scares me more than anything. You were always the one who saw the whole board. And I was just playing checkers. I don't know what I'm asking for. Maybe mercy. Maybe nothing. Maybe just for you to stop before there's nothing left. I didn't reply, because she still didn't understand. Nothing left wasn't a place I would leave her in. It was where I wanted her to live. That next Monday, I sent one final courier envelope. Inside was a single item. A check. Payable to Madison Hill. Amount, $1. Memo line, your value, adjusted for inflation. She cashed it. 2 days later. And that's how I knew she was finally broken. Because pride was the last thing she'd clung to, and now even that had crumbled. My legal team reached out that same week with the final dissolution paperwork. Clean. Efficient. No alimony. No shared assets. No public courtroom. And she signed. She signed without redlining a single line. But that wasn't the real win. The real win was what came after. Because just as she began to vanish from every place she once held status, from her office, her friendships, her family, I was about to hand her the final mirror. The one where she'd see not just what she'd become, but who had always been pulling the strings. And that would require one final performance. The invitation was delivered in a gold-trimmed envelope, handwritten, elegant, unmistakably deliberate. Madison received it 2 weeks after signing the divorce papers. By then, she was living in a rented basement studio outside Montclair. I knew because I'd already paid the first 2 months' rent through a shell company, just to make sure she'd be within driving distance when the final act unfolded. The envelope read, "You are cordially invited to an exclusive shareholders gala celebrating the acquisition and full restructuring of Alara Solutions. Dress code, formal. RSVP required. Guest list non-transferable. ch_. No +1. No location on the front. Just a QR code and her name, alone, embossed in sharp calligraphy. She didn't RSVP. At least not immediately. She probably stared at it for hours, days even, turning it over in her hands, trying to decode what game I was playing. Part of her was terrified to go. The other part, the part of her that still craved significance, couldn't resist the idea that this might be her chance to say something, do something, matter again. She confirmed her attendance the day before the event. I wasn't surprised. The gala was held at the Astoria Grand, a historic ballroom with floor-to-ceiling windows, gold leaf arches, and a view of the Hudson that made men feel like kings. I'd rented the entire building. Every staff member, every camera, every inch of that space was mine for the night. I arrived late by design. Let her sweat first. Madison stood alone near the back of the room in a faded navy gown that had seen better years. Her hair was pulled back in a simple twist, but the tension around her eyes betrayed the effort. She hadn't spoken to anyone. No one approached her. Not one face in that room lit up at the sight of her. She had become what she feared most. Background. And then the spotlight shifted. A hush rippled through the guests as the MC raised his hand. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight as we celebrate the rebirth of a company once driven by distraction and now fueled by clarity. Please welcome to the stage our lead visionary and architect of this new era, Colton Hill. Applause. Camera flashes. I walked up slowly, deliberately, one button of my jacket undone, cufflinks glinting under the lights. I stood behind the mic and scanned the room without emotion. I won't waste your time with numbers, I began. You've all read the reports. Growth is up. Waste is down. Loyalty has returned to a company that once hemorrhaged it. I paused. But this isn't just a celebration of business. It's a reminder. Another pause. That no matter how far you drift, Truth always catches up. I let the silence hang. Then I nodded once, stepped back, and the MC resumed with toasts, music, and polite conversation. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I walked straight toward Madison. She watched me come, shoulders square, lips pressed tight like she'd rehearsed a dozen comebacks, but couldn't decide which one to use. I stopped 3 feet from her. "You showed up," I said. She gave a faint laugh. "You knew I would. You hoping for closure?" "No," she said, voice quiet. "Just a chance to understand." I handed her a folder. Not sealed. No label. Just 3 sheets inside. She opened it. And there it was. A transfer of ownership contract. A digital footprint summary of every flagged message, expense report, and hotel charge. And at the end, a certified letter of recommendation. Signed by me. Her eyes snapped up, wide. "What is this?" "Your freedom," I said. "The contract releases all remaining ties. You're no longer flagged. You'll receive no resistance from background checks or hiring committees." And that letter? It says you led outreach initiatives that changed Alara's growth trajectory. That you stepped aside gracefully during transition. That your time here was marked by collaboration and integrity. Her hands trembled. "You're giving me a clean slate?" "No," I said. "I'm letting you have one." "But why?" I looked her in the eyes, flat and unmoved. "Because when history speaks your name, I decide what it says. Not you." Tears welled, but she blinked them back. And then she asked the only question that mattered. "Is this forgiveness?" "No," I said. "This is finality." I turned and walked away. She didn't follow. Didn't say thank you. Didn't look back. Just stood there in the corner of a party she once thought would belong to her. Because the cruelest revenge isn't destruction. It's rewriting reality so thoroughly, so cleanly, that the person you erase begins to question whether they ever mattered at all. And for Madison Hill, that question would haunt her forever. It's been 6 months since that night. Alara Solutions is thriving, more efficient, more focused, finally rid of the distractions that used to masquerade as leadership. My board is tight, my team is loyal, and the numbers speak for themselves. Every quarter since I took full control has beaten projections. But this story, her story, didn't end in the boardroom. It ended last week, in a small bookstore cafe in Hoboken, where I saw her again for the first time since the gala. Not by design. I was meeting a former colleague for coffee. She walked in behind me. Same woman, but different now. Thin, worn down. Clothes clean but loose, makeup absent. A cloth tote bag over her shoulder. She didn't recognize me at first. Maybe she didn't want to. Maybe she hoped that if she didn't look up, she wouldn't have to face the version of herself reflected in my eyes. But fate doesn't offer such mercy. Her gaze caught mine. And there we were. 2 ghosts. She froze for a breath, then gave me a faint nod. Acknowledgement. Nothing more. I returned it. No hate. No words. Just 2 people standing on opposite sides of a canyon that used to be a marriage. She ordered her coffee and sat in the farthest corner of the shop. Pulled out a used laptop. I noticed the cracked hinge. A borrowed charger. The remnants of a life that used to gleam. I didn't interrupt. That wasn't my role anymore. But as I left, I couldn't help one final glance. She looked up then, just briefly, and this time, she smiled. A sad, hollow smile, full of acceptance. Full of the weight that only comes from realizing you had everything and handed it away. And in that moment, I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No thrill. Just the clean, silent click of a door that had been waiting to shut for too long. Because revenge isn't always fireworks and fury. Sometimes, it's quiet. Sometimes, it's letting them live. Letting them carry the full gravity of their choices into every room they'll ever walk into. Letting them wonder, every single day, what they could have been, if only they hadn't underestimated the man they thought was just the old husband she settled for. She never saw the last blow coming. Because it wasn't public. It wasn't cruel. It was the one thing she'd never prepared for. Oblivion. And for someone like Madison Hill, that was the deepest cut of all.